Don't they know I'm busy spoiling myself?
Have you heard about Concord? It's PlayStation and Firewalk Studios' newly released AAA hero shooter game. Want to play it? Well, too late. Because so few people bought the game that only 2 weeks after launch, the servers have shut down and full refunds have been issued. But how did this game fail so spectacularly? It had a huge budget and spent an entire 8 years in development. What happened? One thing that seems to be getting a lot of hate is Concord's character design. People are saying a lot of things about it, but is it really the problem? I'm not so sure. Let's back up for a second and consider some other reasons the game might have failed. I don't know about you, but the first time I even heard about the game was when people started talking about how few people were playing it, so presumably there was some kind of issue with the marketing. Not to mention, it's a hero shooter game, which is a very saturated genre, where the leaders in the space are all free to play, unlike Concord, which cost $40. But despite all that, some people are hyper-focusing on how the game looks. It's become very trendy to bash the character designs these days. It's getting dogpiled by artists, non-artists, and non-artists pretending to be artists. Don't get me wrong, it's fine to dislike the character designs, but some people are using some really hyperbolic language to describe the designs, and I think they might be taking it a little too far. Honestly, I just don't really like all this negativity. So instead, let's take a look at what Concord's character designs did right. I'm gonna do a little experiment. I'm gonna draw one of the characters from Concord, Bazz, but I'm not gonna redesign her. Instead, I'm gonna try to draw her without changing her character design at all, since I'm not convinced that the design is the problem. But first, how do we get started doing something like this? Before drawing any kind of character, we have to learn a little bit about them. The easiest way to learn about a video game character is, of course, to play the video game. But I haven't played Concord, and statistically speaking, you probably haven't either. And even if you wanted to play it, it's no longer possible, cause it's gone. Therefore, most people ended up judging the character designs by looking at still images of the character models, like this. I don't really think this puts the characters in the best light. In fact, if you just take a look at the character select screen, the animations and voiceovers actually add a ton of personality.
Oh, hi!
I think it's important to look at the characters where they were supposed to be seen, so let's figure out what kind of character Bazz is.
That's right.
I guess she uses knives? Okay, I think one valid criticism of the Concord designs is that they don't really express the character's gameplay archetype very well. Looking at Bazz's gameplay, it's clear she's a nimble, fast-moving flanker. I suppose dual knife wielders in video games tend to be fast, but otherwise, it's just not really that easy to tell. But without changing the design, what can I do to give more of a speedster impression in my drawing? I know some people really don't like it, but I think her hair and glasses are pretty cool and stylish.
Style.
Listening to her voice lines and seeing how unconventional her style is, I'm guessing Bazz is a pretty confident character.
That's right.
So I'll try posing her with that in mind. If I stand her up really straight, like this, that also helps me emphasize the long, straight lines of her legs to give her a speedier feeling, hopefully. And that also lets me move the coat back a bit so it doesn't interrupt the flow of the legs. I also stylized her proportions. In particular, I tried to lengthen her legs, again, to try to give her the sensation of speed. And speaking of stylization, that's something really important I want to talk about. So you might have noticed that I'm not exactly drawing in a very realistic style, compared to Concord, which looks fairly realistic and grounded. I actually think this might be the reason that a lot of people claim to find the character designs unappealing. They choose a lot of bold, interesting elements for their designs. A lot of it seems inspired by 70s sci-fi. While the inspirations are really cool, when they're paired with a super realistic style, they may not necessarily resonate with a modern audience. So, I was curious. I wanted to see how the exact same design would look if I just made it a little more cartoony. We can already kind of see it when we look at their animated shorts.
You've done this before?
Never. No. I learned a lot from my parents. Yes! Mission accomplished!
I actually think they look pretty neat in this style. I won't be doing this style exactly, but I'll be trying something a little different. You'll see later. And also, style isn't the only thing I'll be adjusting. I also want to tweak the shape language a little bit. But what exactly do I mean by that? We usually associate speedy characters with dynamic triangles, sharp angles, and straight lines, whereas Bazz has a lot of round shapes and circles. Check out her glasses and her hair. I'm not changing these, by the way. I think it's fun to have a character with a distinctive look like this. But I think I could make some very minor shape adjustments to these rounded shoulder pads. They're pretty chunky, so in my opinion, it makes her look more like a tank than an agile character. But all I did was thin them out and make them a little bit more angular. Also, check out these sneakers. I actually love them so much. These wing shapes that look like a jet plane? Perfect. Fantastic. Phenomenal. I ended up exaggerating them a bit more since they're so great. The knee pads are a great shape as well, although I wish they weren't so pale. But I'll talk about that a little bit later. I wish they had used more of these shapes throughout because they're so cool. They give an awesome speedster vibe. And after working on it a little bit more, here's the final sketch. I changed up the proportions and shapes a bit, but overall the design is pretty much the same. But now I'm going to start making bigger changes. I'm going to try adding some really strong contrasty shading, similar to the style of Hades or Persona, because design choices are so bold. I want to try using a style that would be able to stand up to these choices and showcase them properly. I felt some really dark shadows would go well with the saturated colors. I started by deciding on the light direction and then did most of the shading at the same time I was doing the line art since, well, they are the same color after all. Then I started filling in some flat colors. Again, I kept them pretty much the same as the original, but don't they look kind of cool next to these super dark shadows? When it comes to colors, one minor thing I did end up adjusting is that I made the knee pads as dark as I could get away with. In the original, I didn't really like how the bright knee pads interrupted the shape of the legs. I wanted to keep them looking long to keep the impression of speed, and after adding some shading and refining, here's the final results. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. I think I did an okay job with it, but it's definitely not perfect. While I did try to keep the actual design as unchanged as possible, it's not like I didn't make any changes at all. For one, I accidentally ended up making the glasses quite a lot bigger. It wasn't on purpose. I also changed her body shape quite a bit more than I intended as well. Although she's quite fit in her original design, I may have exaggerated her hips and waist a bit too much in my attempts. An hourglass figure like this is probably not the best choice for the fast, nimble vibe I was going for. A more athletic build would have been a better choice. And finally, I probably strayed a bit too far from the original retro sci-fi influences. Unfortunately, these problems are likely caused by a skill issue on my part. I'm definitely not the best artist, so it's something I'll need to work on. Or, even if you don't think I cheated, maybe you still don't like my design or interpretation at all. Okay, that said, I hope it's not the case, but there's a good chance you're sitting there thinking that you still don't like the design, even with my changes. What then? That's fine. You don't have to like it. You're allowed to have likes and dislikes. There's a level of subjectivity in all art and design, after all. But the way people are reacting to the Concord designs feels kind of weird to me. It's like it's the first time they've ever seen a character that's not to their taste. Are the Concord characters my favorite designs ever? Probably not. But I could say that for most characters in media, right? I certainly think that they don't deserve this level of vitriol. And also, one thing I'm definitely not trying to say is that I can do better than the artists that worked on these designs. Working in a game studio, especially a large one, can be really complicated. As consumers, we don't know all the limitations and restrictions that the artists were working with. There might have been extreme deadlines or unreasonable demands. Maybe there were constant redesigns. Maybe the whole thing was designed by committee. We can't tell any of that just by looking at the final product. Like I said, it's completely fine not to like something. But sometimes I just wish people would remember that despite that, there are always individual people out there that are just trying their best. So maybe let's just not be so quick to dogpile onto hate trains and add fuel to the fire just because it's trendy to do so. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, maybe try drawing the subscribe button in a different style. Maybe I can do more of these types of videos in the future. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time. Bye bye!